Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Thank you.
Many
Very
more.
much.
May you be blessed with many good, healthy years, bis 120 and more.
Wow.
Good health. And at the same time, while I'm standing, I wish to thank you on behalf of everybody here for the very interesting Gemara lessons, for the new they keep us up to date with the news, and we find it all very extremely interesting. And we all discuss afterwards that the amount of knowledge that you've got, the broadness of it and the depth of it, and this is what you're passing on to us, and we're very grateful for that. Thank you very much, Rabbi. May you only be well, healthy, and happy, and
Thank you very much.
children.
Amen.
Amen.
God bless you all.
Amen.
It's my pleasure really to be here with all of you, and if I can impart a little bit of knowledge, it's only because I'm a student, and we're all students here together, and I'm very, very pleased, I must tell you, because you're all thinkers, and you all come and participate, and that gives me great pleasure, and I can learn from that. And it's always a pleasure to see you all down there. And so let's hope always that we have simchas and we have peace in Israel. And let's hope that this season of so-called goodwill and peace and tranquility, that the whole of the world will replace this terrible terrorism with some understanding of how to live with each other in a manner which is going to help all mankind. So I want to thank you very, very much, Peretz, for your words. You're a very gracious friend, as all of you are. And I only want to wish all of you, Mazel and Bracha, we should always be together on your birthdays, and all simchas, and we should always have peace and quiet in the world. Amen.
Amen.
Now we go back to the Gemaras. We're starting a new Perek. A Perek of, this Perek is, we've had all the Perek of Dinim Mominus, which is dealing with civil law. And now we're going to go over to the Kohen Gadol, and we'll see what's going on with that. Kohen Gadol is one Yud Ches. We all got Yud Ches in the left top corner. That's right. Kohen Gadol, Don V'Donin, I say. The Kohen Gadol can judge, and we can judge him. In other words, what's happening here is to find out, well, what is the difference between the commoners and the aristocracy, the leaders of the community. So in the case of a Kohen Gadol, who has certain specific and specialized status, nevertheless, he also has certain restrictions, and the Gemara explains this. So here, first of all, the Mishnah explains and says that the Kohen Gadol, he can judge. That is to say, he can join a Sanhedrin, and he can be one of the Dayanim in the cases. And in that case, we'll learn more about that later. And of course, if he is guilty of, or so-called alleged guilty of any particular offense, which might be in Mominus, that is to say, in civil matters, or in capital matters, then Doni Nosai, then he is also, we have to judge him. Mayid, he can testify, he can be a witness, in other words, in cases, or Mayid in Osai, and if he is in the dock, then also this is the case in which we can testify against him. Monty, come. Very nice.
From the KFC.
Yes, of course. Please bring it here.
Okay,
that's from that's for
happy birthday.
Oh, thank you very, very much, and thank you also for the refreshments which come from the synagogue for all of us. Please put it over here and let people enjoy. We've got that there. It is behind you, Martin. Thank you. Now we've got some. Please don't be shy. I want you all to enjoy it. It's Hanukkah after all, and whatever is in there, I'm sure, is to give you something of the oil. We'll talk about Hanukkah a little later on. In the meantime, we're doing this Mishnah. By the way, Yisrael, I did mention to our friends regarding Vita. Have you heard any more how she is?
She's in hospital and she's had a fall. She fell on her back. Apparently injured herself. So
injured her back? That's terrible.
She was at the pharmacy, and I went to visit her, and she's recuperating.
Is she comfortable?
Yeah. Yeah.
please convey my very warm
I
wishes
told them
and
that
a
we all
full shalom from
concerned.
all of us to her.
Thank you.
And tell her we miss her at the shiur. She's our lady here.
Thank you.
Very nice. All right, while I'm here, we'll complete the register.
Nothing is shown up. She felt
What we got here now?
She's had problems with her back.
What we got?
She's really unstable with things.
Ellie's here.
Ellie is here.
Ellie and Monty.
Yeah.
You're already marked absent, all of you. Monty.
I mean, notice it.
Simon. And who else has come? Yisrael is here now. Okay, love is here in this list.
Barney, you've got.
Where?
Barney was.
Barney, I put him in.
Yes.
Abe Shazzy, David Lyons, Yaakov Lerner, Colin, Harold, Sally Diner, I'm here. John Collins is out. Here, Reader. Now Yisrael. Right. Are you all in? Ruben,
Just making a video of the shiur.
Oh, good. So we go back to the Mishnah, my dear friends. So we know then that the Kohen Gadol can be a judge himself, and also he can be judged. And the same thing applies to the testimony in cases. He can give witness, and also if he is unfortunately in the dock, so therefore we can witness against him. Now Chayletz, he can perform chalitza. You know that it's very important to know that from the Torah, we don't say that because a couple and the man has died and the lady has been left without children, so therefore she should be thrown out on the streets. No, the rabbis, you see, we look at the Torah and the rabbis have made this ceremony. It requires a bezdin of at least 5 rabbis for this. Normally it's yibum. Yibum means a marriage automatically by the brother of the deceased. If he feels, however, that he cannot marry the lady because he is already married, or he doesn't want to for some other reason, then she gives, it's called chalitza. So in that case, they have to call a bezdin, and she spits in front of him to say, you're not going to raise any children in the name of your brother, shame on you, because the Torah says that you should. And after that, having done that, that is to say the Kohen Gadol, if his brother, you understand me, doesn't want to marry, then he can give that chalitza. Or if he is a person who happens to be a brother of the deceased brother, then in that case, the lady is free to marry anybody else. That reason there is a problem which you will understand, because a Kohen Gadol cannot marry a widow. In normal circumstances, a priest, you see, a Kohen cannot marry a divorcee, he cannot marry a geyorista, and of course the Kohen Gadol can't even marry a widow. An ordinary Kohen can marry a widow. There was an argument in the Gemara because there is a verse in the book of Ezekiel in which he mentions this question of the widow, but the fact is that he claimed, that you shouldn't marry a widow because the Kohen Gadol, he can only marry a virgin of Israel, that is to say a person who has not been married before. So, therefore, it's a cholet. Now, the point is also, it says, v'choletzin leishtay. That is to say, if he dies and leaves his wife without children, then the chalitza can also be performed for his wife. That is to say, one of his brothers can marry her. But a Kohen Gadol himself, you see, he would not be able to marry a widow because she'd be a widow. And under those circumstances, he cannot do that. But he can be a chalitz in the ordinary sense. That is to say that if you see yibum, I must tell you this, the yibum in itself, it's only a technical question as to whether the marriage is already served by the fact that he has taken on this lady because she was the widow of his deceased brother, and in that case it's only an intimate relationship, one intimate relationship which creates Yibum. But after that, what happens? After that, she's a widow. And under those circumstances, he can't have a second intimate relationship. So the result is, we say he can't do that at all. So there is a problem which the Gemara will go into a little later on. So he says, Aval hu eino miyabim. You see that he can't take her with Yibum, the reason, as I've explained to you. But miyabim is ishtay, so the point is the Yibum, which is that marriage, in order to preserve the name of the deceased brother. This is the whole point. They should raise a child, the first child, in other words, of such a marriage would be in the name of the deceased brother, you understand? That is the whole purpose of the ceremony and the commandment of Yibum. Chalitza, it was only because, as I say, it happens that there are circumstances in which a brother doesn't want to take on that responsibility. You notice that in the book of Ruth, for example, how it was that Boaz was able to marry Ruth, but in reality there was another nearer relative of the deceased Elkanah, the deceased brother, who had really rights. He had the rights of marriage in the sense of Yibum, but he refused that. So therefore, Chalitza was performed, and Boaz then was able to marry Ruth in order, and that was destined in order that King David should come from such a union. And as you know, it was Ruth who was the ancestress of King David. So let's go on further. Mipnei shehu also b'almana. So you see, the Yibum explains to you that although there has to be a chalitza, that's all right, but he can't make Yibum because of the fact that the lady, whoever it is an almana, and a kohen gadol cannot marry a widow. So therefore, that's the reason. Now, meis lo meis. Supposing a relative of the kohen gadol died. So the Mishnah says, Eina yotze achar hamita. He doesn't follow the bier, the coffin, immediately. He can't do that because being a kohen gadol, he's on a certain level where the people, the common people, you understand, cannot. They have to. It's the whole crowd. They have to be with the coffin, but he's got to be in a place where he is hidden, so to speak. And explains here, when the people are hidden, that is to say, they've already carried it in the bier. They're carrying this coffin, and they've already gone, say, round the corner, and then he comes in and he can start following, because he has got to be very careful, because he's a Kohen Gadol, and therefore his position, his status must not be in any way compromised. And if the people are exposed, in other words, they are seen, then he's got to be hidden. So the point is that there has to be, obviously, a certain element of discretion here, that whilst there is this big funeral process going on, because it's his relative, and as you know, that all the relatives, there are 7 basic relatives, for which even the Kohen has got to go on the cemetery, and that's the father, mother, brother, sister, son, daughter. Now there's where the question of a wife comes in, you see, to the wife. So there's the 7 relatives. But the Kohen Gadol is in a different position. He's even worse than the ordinary Kohen, of course. So the situation is that when they are moving in a mass, and they are revealed, that is to say, they are open in an open place, he's got to be in a situation where they don't see him. And vice versa, if they've followed around the corner, and the coffin is they're carrying the bier right to the grave, to the cemetery, then again he is able then to come to follow on slowly towards the procession. But he goes on to explain as follows: And he goes with them at Pesach HaSharuir. He goes to them as far as the gate of the city, because you see there are places where he can be hidden. As soon as they go beyond the gate of the city, there's nowhere in which there can be any possibilities of being hidden, because it's all open ground. And he goes to that's on the way to the cemetery. So he's got to be careful. Now the Gemara says, Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir's opinion is. But Rabbi Yehuda goes further. He says, Eina yotzei min hamikdash. He says to go to a funeral in order to be with people. No, he says he can't even go out of the sanctuary. Why? He explains here. He doesn't go out. Shenema, because it says in Vayikra, min hamikdash lo yotzei. He should not go out. He can't go out of the sanctuary. So for that purpose, Rabbi Yehuda goes, as they say, is most stringent in this matter. Okay, Shehu Menachem Acherim, but when he has to comfort other people who are, mourners, Derech Kol Ha'am, in the way of all the people, over in Bozeh Achazeh, and the people, they all go one after the other. Then there has to be somebody between him and the procession. In other words, the big procession goes, then there is somebody, whoever it may be, could be an aide, but then he goes on the side, but there is a person between the mass of the people and himself. This is in order to keep the status and dignity of the Kohen Gadol. As understand, it's a very important thing and a very simple thing. Now, and when he is to be comforted by other people, all the people, they say to him, Ono kaparosacha, we are your kapara, we are your atonement. And and he says to them, Tisparuchu min hashamayim, may you be blessed from heaven. That is the manner in which the Menachem Avelim was only in the case of the Kohen Gadol. You know what I mean by Nichum Avelim. You have it sometimes in shul where the mourner sits on a low stool, and the people have to comfort them, and they say, Hamokim Yenachem Eschem, B'soshar Aveleitzei Yerushalayim. May the Almighty God comfort you amongst others among Zion in Jerusalem. We are all mourners for the Beis Hamikdash, for the sanctuary, for the holy temple that was destroyed. And of course, in the case of a Kohen Gadol who has to sit on the low chair because he's a mourner, then the people come to him and they say, we are your atonement for us. Well, let us hope, through all the people, we hope that you will have atonement and have comfort, from your deceased. And he says to them, Tisparchu Hashem, let the Almighty God comfort you, bless you for what you have said. In all the normal cases, the mourner keeps quiet. He doesn't say anything at all. But of course, you must understand, he would also say, Baruch Hashem, grace, whatever it may be, he has in his heart to thank the people who are coming to comfort him.
Rabbi, is it the custom that if you've got a seated shul, but you come in as a mourner, you're not supposed to go back to your seat?
No, not. The custom is that you take one seat further away from the Hora Kodesh. That's what it means. So it's not a question of going to your own seat. You go a little step further back, because while you're in mourning, a person has got to. It grieves. Show that there is a little bit of difference that in his meditation he should feel a little bit more humble in regard to the situation in which he is. In other words, not to carry on his own status for a while, because it might be misinterpreted to mean that he has no interest, really no feeling for the deceased, but on the contrary, having gone back a little bit to another seat, say the seat next to him, then a little bit further away, it shows that he has a feeling for the deceased. And in that case, his humility is a little stronger. That's only a custom, however, you must understand.
Not in the Talmud.
Pardon?
Not in the Torah.
No, it's not. But I must tell you this also. about minhagim. Perhaps I'll give you a talk about the difference between halacha and minhag. You know, minhag it takes root so much so on people that it becomes law. And if you don't do what they do in that place and with this minhag, although the minhag, I'm not saying it's a minhag shtus, that it doesn't mean a minhag which is a foolish one, but nevertheless, it's got on so strong that people get very cross if you don't observe it. I'll give you a little example of that. When I first came here, I come from England, as you know, and I come from communities which in a mourner's house we wouldn't shake hands and we wouldn't kiss and we wouldn't talk. We just meditate, and you sit and you give a menachem ovaltine to the mourners, and people, you know, they are very, very serious. And in this case, I came here when I came from that community, and therefore I did not shake hands with the monk. Do you know that man, he wouldn't talk to me ever since then. You see, everybody shakes hands, so therefore I shook hands afterwards. If you shake hands, then it's a minhag, which had taken on so strongly that if you don't observe that minhag, they think that the whole world has fallen down for them. And if you would shake hands in Mea Shearim, they'd throw you out. You see, it's all a question of usage. And that's why sometimes minhag, we say sometimes minhag can become a law. But there are very many things, even you take a Maggid David as an example. You don't see it mentioned anywhere. It's not in the Torah, it's not in the Talmud. In fact, the first time is the 16th century on a banner in Prague. That's the first time that it appeared. And the Magen David, you see it now, it's on the flag, and then, you know, it's a symbol of the Jewish people in many respects, which isn't really our symbol, but has become a very, very important sign of Jewish people. And yet, you know, I've seen it in China, I've seen it in Japan. Some Christian churches had a Maggid David on it. I'm speaking now of the 6-pointed star, not the 5-pointed star. The 5-pointed star is called the Star of Solomon, which is the Arabs have got that, Muslims have that. So you see, it's all minhagim. But the real symbol of Israel is the menorah, and we'll talk about that a little later on.
So, Rabbi, the word minhag, does that mean a custom?
The word is custom. Minhag is a custom.
That's what they say. Ben makom.
Yeah. Minhag HaMokim. Yeah, well, you see, that's another thing. What Peretz said is also very nice, because we say in our laws, Minhag HaMokim Yachziku. You should perform the minhag of the place. In other words, you know, here, for example, here is a minhag which we don't perform in England, but in Ma'ariv, after Ma'ariv, we'll make a haskara, you know, a memorial prayer, and the mother will say Kaddish. Now, we don't do that in England. I only see that here. It's a minhag. It's a very nice minhag. When I was in South Africa, I came to Brantford, which isn't far from Bloemfontein. I was in charge of those places as well. And at night time, this was interesting, that at night time, after Ma'ariv, they said the Psalm of the Day, which we normally recite at Shachris. You know, the Psalm of the Day, like today we say, Yom Yom Revi, this is the fourth day which the Levites had sung in the Beis HaMikdash, Shayom Yom Beis HaMikdash. And they recited that, and somebody said a Kaddish. Now that's their minhag, but there's nothing wrong with that. I can only tell you the minhagim that I've seen are thousands, and all of them are right, no matter. You understand? I remember when my Rebbe, Rabbi Koppel Kahana, Zachreinah Levracha, a great Rav, he was really a brilliant man, and he told me that it was when he was in shul one day. So some shuls say Avarachim before Ashrei and Shabbos. You know, there's an Avarachim, which really goes back to the time of the Albigenses, when there was suffering, you know, amongst the Albigenses, and Jewish people always suffer, of course, when there's these pogroms. And so the Avarachim is usually recited in many shuls before the Ashrei on a Shabbos. We only recite it on Tisha B'Av, you know, just before, in the month of Av, in other words, and also we also recite it only whenever, you know, sometimes there is a special occasion. So what happened was, some people said they started to shout in shul, we say Avarachim today, the other side. We do not say Avarachim. So what happens? They go to the rabbi and they say, you're both right. And that is the answer, you see, because you see, minhagim are not laws. They are customs which we become so used to them that we feel very uncomfortable if we don't utilize them. The same thing applies in the music. I noticed in one shiur, it's very interesting, because we have traditional tunes, as you know. And that is an interesting traditional tune, which is almost in every show. And somehow or other, there came a time where the chatan sings a different niggun, just to give a bit of a change. And there was big objections in the show. They want the same tunes that they all know, because it's a custom like that. And that's the way we all feel much more comfortable when we have doing everything the same.
So actually, in the case of in a house of mourning, when one shakes hands now, a custom has actually overtaken the law then.
Yeah, correct. Well, not a law, but the law is, of course, that you sit. In fact, the first 3 days, you know, a person sits in mourning and doesn't even reply, as it were, to any greetings in the same way as you normally would. The same thing applies, I mean, with regard to davening, you know.
Yeah.
As I'm in the middle of davening, you know, people come along, but you see, if you don't reply, it's rudeness today. It's not a question, you see, of the law. It is the way in which people act. They must act with discretion. Every person, I've always said this, when you want to perform something, and you want to do it with discretion. Manashach, you know, even, I mean, I'm sorry to have to say this, but there are people that we know, they come to shul, their motor cars, and goodness knows what else. What are you going to do? We don't have to, if you say to these people the law, which is you cannot be Machal Shabbos. You're not Machal Shabbos of Farhesia, but Farhesia means you really bring together a million people and say, I'll show you that I'm a Shagit, you know? But the people are doing these things. Well, you can't say to them, don't come, because Manashach, if you say don't come, what is the alternative? They'll go either somewhere else or they'll go nowhere. And this to me is more sinful than if they would come to shul and they would dabble with everybody else. And we feel, and you know, a comfort in the communal attitudes and feelings. It's a very sorry state of affairs in a way that there are rabbis who don't, somehow or other, they're not flexible enough to realize that sometimes one has to break a law, if you like, in order to satisfy a person's conscience. I had a case here, for example, where one person who was almost on his deathbed, and he knew that he was dying, and he wanted to come to shul, and we had to bring him in a wheelchair. And the rabbi said, no, you cannot come in a wheelchair. You can't come to shul in a wheelchair. That man passed away the following week. I think that was very, very wrong. You see, sometimes you have to break a law, as it were, in order to fulfill the real law, which is to comfort a person and to give him a feeling of inspiration. You know that when you have a Jew on his deathbed, and after all, he wants to say Shema Yisrael, but he says, look, you must give me chazah. Well, now you know yourself that it's wrong to give a Jew a non-kosher food or whatever it is, but in this case, you must give him what he wants so that it will enable him to say Shema Yisrael. It's all a question of discretion, how a person must act. He must be a good rabbi, is a rabbi who inspires his community by understanding what they have to have in order to give them, by virtue of their lack of knowledge of the Hamaratas, they haven't learned enough to understand the real things. But the point is you have to help them to fulfill the spirit which lies within them in order that they should have that comfort on the deathbed and feel that it comes to HaKadosh Baruch or whatever the case may be in a proper way. So my friends, when we talk about minhagim, as I say, a minhag, it's a custom, and it's only relative to a certain place. and you observe it in accordance with that. Unless, of course, it's such a minhag which is stos, that is to say, a nonsense minhag. For example, I'll give you also what happened here. When I first came here, I noticed that as soon as we finished Musaf, and the people stand for Kaddish, and Enkel Ahenu is sung, and people stand there from Enkel Ahenu to the Donolam. That's a minhag stos. So I said to people, I think you can sit down now. And they went, I heard a crack. I said, thank God we can sit down. But can you understand that people should stand for Enkel Ahenu?
We know that.
You understand? This is, and that was a custom here. It was in, when we were still not down in
Brisbane Street.
In Brisbane Street. And I was amazed, but the fact is, nothing surprises me. And you treat it in the way that, where you treat it like you have to treat people like a baby. You've got to teach them from Alapay. Same thing happens with the Duchen. Now, there are certain shuls that don't want a Duchen. They say the priests are not good people and the priests whatever they are. Who are you to judge that? You're not the person to tell a Kohen. The only Kohen who is exempt is one who has blood on his hands. A murderer, whatever it is. But otherwise, he has to go to the Duchen. So when I first came, he was at Pesach, and I said, all those people who are Kohanim, please come onto the Duchen. I'm not going to ask the board of management for a permission. So, you see, and about 40 people came forward. And then I had someone, a lady, she was shouting to me and said, thank you, Rabbi, I only saw this in London 40 years ago. And the point is, since then, we're Duchen. That is already a halacha. You see, because that's a din where you give the priest his obligation, and that is an obligation. And that's why we say many, many things regarding minhagim and the difference between minhag and halacha. When we speak of halacha, it's something quite different. There are some people who unfortunately have a minhag of eating treif all the time, you see, and they made it a halacha. Okay. That's right. Now, a little bit further. Okay, Shemavrin, I say, Kol ha'am mesuvin al haaretz. Okay, Shemavrin, when you give the Kohen Gadol his mourner's meal, you know that after a funeral, so we don't, obviously, expect the mourner to have the feeling at the time that he could go and make a meal for himself. So always a stranger makes a meal for him. And we call that the Suda Sabra. So, and usually that meal is a hard-boiled egg or lentils, because these are round, because life must go on. It's a continuous thing, and he has to know that. So when you give him the meal, so all the people sit on the ground. And Bahu and the Kohen Gadol, Mesav ala Safsel. He sits on a bench. Now this is interesting, isn't it? Because normally, as I say, with mourners, they should all sit down on the floor. Nowadays, they sit on a low stool, and that's all right. Well, you know, the origins in England of the chairman was the fact that people of the family, they always were on the floor, and the master of the house, he was on a chair, and that's why they call it the chairman. And ever since then, it's been the chairman has been the leader of the meeting. All right. Now we come to Hamelech. Well, we'll deal with that later. We will deal with that the next time. What about the king? How about the king? All we know about the king is lo done v'lo done in Osei, that he cannot be a judge in a Sanhedrin, and he cannot be judged. He's not the one that we can't judge him, say. We have to judge him, it's a whole different set of circumstances. And lo me'ed v'lo me'ed in Osei, and he cannot give testimony, and you can't testify against him. Lo choletz, he cannot give chlitzah, v'lo choltz in Lishtain, he can't give chlitzah to his wife. Lo meyabim, he can't give yibum, and v'lo meyabim Lishtain, and he can't give yibum to his wife either. So we'll leave it at that, just up to here, because I want to talk a bit about Hanukkah here as well. So let us say we're up to Rabbi Huda Omer, okay? Interesting. And we meet on the 13th of January, don't forget.
That's Bingo's Day.
Oh, yes. 16th December. I thought it was the 15th.
16th.
Well, it's old Del's old word.
The old word
15th.
could be
15th